As we gather today, let us remember that we in the Diocese of Northern Michigan acknowledge the sacred land where we work, live, teach, learn, and build community. This land is the territory of the Anishinaabe people. We recognize the repeated violations of sovereignty, territory, and water perpetrated by European and other settlers that have impacted the original inhabitants of this land. We extend our respect to citizens of these First Nations people who live here and their ancestors who have lived here for over 500 generations, and to all Indigenous people. We also know that this acknowledgement is insufficient. It does not undo the harm that has been done and continues to be perpetrated now against Indigenous people, their land, air, and water.
Sorrowing here, but now they taste unmingled love and joy without a tear. The consecrated cross I'll bear till death shall set me free, and then go home my crown to wear, for there's a crown for me. Oh, precious cross, oh, glorious crown, oh, resurrection day, when Christ the Lord from heaven comes down and bears my soul away. No, there's a cross for everyone, and there's a cross for me.
The Holy Gospel of Jesus Christ according to Matthew. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." The Gospel of the Lord. From that time on, the very first words of this reading tell us that we are at a defining moment in the lives of Jesus and the disciples. Jesus had made mention of it before, but now he just comes out and says it plainly. I've got to go to Jerusalem, and I'm going to suffer, mostly at the hands of the religious elite, and then I'll be killed. But after 3 days, I'll come back. It's a heck of a thing to say out of the blue to a group of your closest friends, but they were probably never going to be ready to hear it. There was this expectation, a deep hope in the hearts of the Jewish people that the Messiah, the Anointed One, would eventually come and be a conquering hero. He would overcome the Roman oppressors and restore the Jews to their rightful place in society, and all would be right in the world again. So when Jesus laid out this plan, the disciples were shocked. It wasn't just a weird thing for Jesus to say. It was the very opposite of what they were thinking and hoping would happen. I don't blame Peter one bit for speaking up. God forbid it. This must never happen to you. To the disciples, maybe it sounded as though Jesus was admitting defeat before the fight had even begun. But the Jesus way was far more different, far more countercultural than they could understand right at that moment. I'm pretty sure that's still true for most of us, most of the time. Just after Peter and the disciples had their big moment where they were given the authority to proclaim this radical gospel of Christ that takes root where we least expect it and spreads out in all directions, Jesus' response to Peter's objection came in a pretty harsh way. "Get behind me, Satan." When you and I hear that, it's important to know that what comes to our minds is not what came to Peter's mind. Because of the way our religious imagination has developed over thousands of years, the biblical word Satan has become synonymous with our idea of the devil, the red guy with horns and a pitchfork. The devil made me do it, that guy. Well, the word that Jesus used, Satan, is derived from a Hebrew word, Hasatan, and it means, very simply, the accuser. Up until the first century, there was really no common Jewish concept of this personified devil that we have today. And because Jesus and the disciples would have been intimately familiar with the writings of the Old Testament as Jews, they would have thought of the word Satan in completely different terms than we do now. Jesus wasn't calling Peter the devil. Peter meant well. He was all in at this point, but he didn't understand the nature of the destiny of Jesus as the Christ. And that's what Jesus was pointing out when he said, "For you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." And that brings us to the real meat of the passage. If anybody wants to become my follower, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. The disciples knew exactly what he was referring to here. Crucifixion was a common mode of punishment at the time, and they all had vivid images in their minds of people who had taken up crosses only to die on them. And Jesus continued, For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it." The disciples listened intently as the lumps in their throats grew. As humans, we have a problem. Well, we have a lot of problems, but one in particular that relates today. When we decide that we believe in God down through history, we then proceed to assume that the God in which we believe feels the way we do about everything. It becomes less of a belief system and more of a way to claim that we're right about something, or everything, as the case may be. A lot of people have said it, but I like how Mark Twain puts it best when he said, "God created man in God's own image, and man, being ever a gentleman, returned the favor." All manner of things have been done in the name of God in the assumption that God was all for it. Wars, mistreatment, abuse, oppression, the worst that humans are capable of has been assigned to God's will. Weaponizing faith so that it becomes an excuse to do unto others before they do unto us. The Christian church has a history of using the idea of God's will to justify turning a blind eye to the suffering and mistreatment of our neighbors, particularly those neighbors who are different than we are. Peter thought he was following the will of God when he opposed what Jesus was telling them would happen. Peter was a Jew, and the Jews believed God willed that Messiah would liberate them and restore them. They were under the thumb of the Romans. Their sacred space had been invaded. They were ultimately not in charge of their own destiny as a nation. This is why the message of Jesus largely fell on deaf ears. Everyone had other ideas about who Jesus should be and what he should do. And suffering and death at the hands of the religious elite had nothing to do with it. How often do we find ourselves in that situation? How often do we assume we know what God thinks and wants, and in actuality, it's what we think and what we want? I mean, let's be honest, it's a lot harder to do the research, to become intimately familiar with issues, to stretch ourselves to see more than our opinion. It's a lot harder to risk being wrong and to humbly ask and look to see where God is. Instead, we've too often already decided that we are where God is, that we know who is right and wrong, and then all that's left is to speak it out as God's chosen mouthpiece. And just like Peter, it's open mouth, insert foot. And there we stand, with no way of taking it back, and the words of Jesus ringing in our ears. You have your mind set not on the things of God, but on human things. At this point, the disciples really considered themselves followers of Jesus. They were his closest friends and confidants. But Jesus raises the stakes and says, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Deny the ways we want things to be. Deny trusting in our own understanding. Deny our need to be right above all things. And deny that it is even possible through doing any of these things to save our own lives. But if we lose our lives, if we let go of our lives for his sake, if we take up our cross, if we begin to live not for being right, but for being with people and loving people in the messy tension of life, Jesus says we will find our lives. Not save our lives, but find our lives. Just saving your life is only surviving, just keeping yourself alive, but finding your life. Finding your life is uniting yourself with Jesus, doing what he does, loving what he loves, embodying the way of Christ. Make no mistake about it. The way of Christ leads only one place: self-denial, self-sacrifice for your fellow humans, no matter if they're right or wrong. Is it risky? Yes. Will you be hurt? Most likely. Will it be uncomfortable and hard? All signs point to yes. But will you find your life? Without a doubt. After all, how do we profit if we gain the whole world but lose our lives? I truly believe that the love of God unites us and reconciles us and overcomes all obstacles. But life is a process of living into that reality and letting go of our attachment to our self-driven nature. May we find our lives by giving them away in love, one person at a time, for the sake of Christ. Amen.
Jesus calls us o'er the tumult of our lives, while restless sea, day by day, his sweet voice sounded, saying, Christian, follow me. Jesus calls us from the worship of the vain world's golden store, from each idol that would keep us saying, Christian, love me more. In our joys and in our sorrows, days of toil and hours of need, still he calls, and in cares and pleasures, Christian,